Why would a stupid drunk joke about my husband's bedroom problems end with a stranger handing me divorce papers in the middle of his office lobby? How did one birthday toast turn into the moment my whole life stopped being a joke to everyone but me? I'm Lenore Vane, and I used to believe marriage meant security, not boredom. I did not walk onto the Aurora Hotel rooftop bar planning to be cruel. I told myself I just wanted one fun night before Michael's big birthday dinner. Chloe said I had been acting like a widow with a living husband lately. Jenna joked that my face looked like someone trapped under a wet blanket. I laughed too loud and blamed everything on stress, bills, and Michael's constant tired eyes. The music on the rooftop was warm and lazy, making everything feel softer, easier, lighter. Raphael, the musician who sometimes tended bar, recognized us and waved with that practiced, easy smile. I liked how his eyes paused on me, not on my ring or my worries. When he poured my first drink, I said something about needing courage for married life. He answered that every queen deserved a little stage time, and I drank that line deeply. Chloe rolled her eyes and said Michael should be there instead of hiding at home. I told them he said he was exhausted and wanted a quiet night together on the couch. Saying those words out loud felt heavy, like I was carrying wet clothes in my mouth. I changed them quickly, telling the girls he hated when I had fun without him. It was not what his message said, but it sounded better in my story. Jenna checked the group chat and saw his actual text, asking sweetly when I might come home. She frowned a little and asked if I was sure he was really being controlling. I shrugged and said he always sends messages like that when he feels insecure about our bedroom. Chloe leaned forward like she smelled gossip and told me not to hold back with details. I took another long drink and said something about slow nights and heavy silences between us. The wind caught my hair, and for a moment I almost stopped myself from going further. Then Raphael laughed near our table, and I felt that familiar rush of borrowed importance. I told them Michael had bedroom problems, using those exact words for the first time out loud. Chloe burst into loud, delighted laughter, slapping the table like I'd told the joke of the year. Jenna smiled weakly, eyes sliding away, but I focused only on the laughter and attention. Something in my chest loosened when Chloe repeated the phrase, louder, like a catchy lyric. It felt like the room turned its head toward me, even if nobody really did. I pretended not to notice the slight shame, hiding under the noise like dust under furniture. I said I loved Michael, but I was not a nun, and everyone laughed again. The truth was, I hated how vulnerable he looked when things did not work between us. I hated how small and guilty I felt afterward, like his fear and mine were contagious. It was easier to turn that fear into a joke before it swallowed me whole. When Michael's next text arrived, asking if I was safe, I read it differently aloud. I said he was asking when his broken engine might come home, making it sound pathetic. Chloe almost cried from laughing, wiping her eyes and asking how I survived such a tragedy. Raphael passed by with shots and said my husband sounded boring, which felt like a secret medal. I tilted my phone screen away because his real message had a small heart at the end. Admitting that would soften the story, and I did not want softness tonight, only sparkles. We took photos near the glass railing, city lights behind us like another crowd watching. I turned slightly so my ring hand faced away from the camera, just a small vanity. When Raphael offered to take a picture, he stood a little closer than necessary behind me. His arm almost touched my shoulder, and Chloe raised her eyebrows in silent encouragement across the table. I told myself it was just harmless flirting, just a little oxygen for a tired woman. I promised silently that I would go home soon, hold Michael, and be kind again. That promise felt comfortable enough that I allowed myself another drink, then another after that. By the time we left the rooftop, my laugh came quicker than my good sense. In the elevator, Chloe replayed my bedroom problems line and suggested I use it at the birthday. I said I might, pretending to be shocked at myself, but secretly enjoying the idea of a bigger stage. Jenna finally said, maybe he would feel hurt, hearing that in front of family and friends. I rolled my eyes and said men needed to hear the truth sometimes, or they never change. Outside the hotel, the air felt cooler, sharper, but I shoved that feeling away. I ordered a car home and told the girls I would text them tomorrow with more drama. During the ride, Michael sent another message, saying he hoped I got back safely soon. I stared at the screen, feeling a brief, annoying sting of guilt under the fading alcohol. I answered that I was fine and that he should relax, adding a laughing emoji. When I stepped into our apartment, the living room lights were low and the television was muted. Michael sat on the couch with his laptop open, glasses on, papers arranged in a neat line. For a second, I saw pure, tired worry in his face before he fixed it into something calmer. He asked softly if I had a good time, and I said it was fine, nothing special. As I moved past him, my eyes caught the laptop screen, showing a spreadsheet with initials and dates. Before I could read more, he quickly minimized it, saying he was just reviewing work schedules. His phone on the coffee table lit up with a calendar reminder titled Riverside Center, 7:30 p.m., Meeting, Personal. I laughed and asked if he was finally getting a hobby that did not involve complaining. He smiled without warmth and said he just needed to handle some things, nothing to worry about. I tossed my bag on the chair and said he was worried about everything, especially his useless bedroom engine. His jaw tightened slightly, but his voice stayed calm as he told me to get some sleep. I told myself he was sulking and that tomorrow's party would shake him out of this mood. In the hallway near our bedroom, the apartment felt strangely quiet, like it was holding its breath. As I kicked off my shoes, I heard a faint beep from his phone, like a recording app stopping. I shrugged, told myself he was being dramatic and weird again, and went to bed smiling at my own joke. The next morning my head pounded, but my phone screen looked beautiful anyway. I lay on the couch in the kitchen living room, scrolling last night's rooftop photos. In every picture, my smile looked wide and alive, like nothing was wrong. Raphael appeared in 2 shots, slightly behind me, eyes amused, arms relaxed, confident. Chloe had already commented with fire emojis, saying I was wasted but iconic. Seeing that word about myself made my stomach settle and my guilt fade quickly. Michael moved quietly around the kitchen, making coffee, his steps slow but strangely measured. He did not ask why I came home so late, which annoyed me. Normally he would ask a dozen questions, looking hurt and desperate for reassurance. Instead, he simply placed a mug on the table and checked his phone. The calmness felt strange, like walking into a room where a picture was slightly crooked. Finally, he said he had an appointment later, something personal, and asked about my plans. I rolled my eyes and said I needed to detox, maybe gym, maybe nothing. Inside, I wondered who he was meeting, but I pretended not to care. When he went to change, I glanced at his phone lying face up nearby. A calendar alert was already visible, set for Riverside Center 7:30 p.m., meeting personal. For a second, I imagined him sitting with some dull therapist crying about our bedroom. The image made me smile, not kindly, more like I had already won some argument. I told myself he was probably finally admitting I had reasons to be bored. Leo padded into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes, asking why Daddy slept on the couch. I answered quickly that Daddy fell asleep watching boring shows, nothing to worry about. Michael returned, kissed Leo's hair and gave me a small, unreadable glance. Something about his eyes felt different, steady instead of wounded, which unsettled me. When he left for his appointment that evening, he did not ask for company. He just said he would be home later and reminded me to lock up. I made a joke about him starting a secret second family, then laughed alone. He smiled a little, but it was the patient smile people give loud children. After he closed the door, I poured myself a drink and opened Raphael's messages. He had sent a voice note from rehearsal, saying the rooftop felt empty without us. I listened twice and decided Michael should see that other men still found me interesting. Instead of actually showing him, I saved that thought for later arguments, like ammunition. When Michael finally returned, he did not smell of beer or strangers, only outside air. His shoulders were relaxed, his voice soft, and he asked calmly about Leo's homework. I expected him to ask about my day, about whether I missed him at all. Instead, he said he was tired and would read for a while before sleeping. The lack of interrogation annoyed me more than any jealous comment ever had. A small part of me wondered what he had discussed in that personal meeting. The next day we went grocery shopping together, something we usually treated like a small date. Normally we joked in the aisles, choosing snacks and little treats for Leo. This time Michael walked with a list on his phone and a focused expression. He compared prices carefully, checked items off, and ignored my suggestions for extra wine. I teased that he was acting like an accountant, not a husband, and he barely reacted. At the checkout, he stopped me when I reached for our shared card. He politely told the cashier to split the bill, paying for essentials while I covered extras. My cheeks warmed, not from shame, but from the shock of losing silent privileges. I told myself he was being petty because I joked about him with friends last night. The cashier gave me a quick glance like she heard more than either of us said. Outside in the parking lot, the winter air felt sharper against my slightly bruised pride. Michael stepped a few meters away, answering a call from an unknown number. His posture was relaxed, head tilted, one hand in his pocket, looking strangely confident. I could not hear the words, just the calm tone and occasional quiet responses. He nodded once, checked his watch, then glanced back at me and Leo. When he returned, he said traffic might be bad tomorrow near Riverside and asked about my schedule. The mention of Riverside made my skin prickle, though I could not explain exactly why. I laughed and said he sounded like a man with secret spy missions and files. He said nothing, just opened the car door for Leo and reminded him about school reading. On the drive home, Leo chattered about a class project while I stared at Michael's profile. His jaw looked less tense, his hands steady, like he was driving towards something certain. At home, he opened the mail himself and stacked envelopes in a careful, neat line. When I reached for one out of habit, he gently said he needed to organize first. I snapped that I was not a child and did not need permission to see my mail. He replied calmly that he wanted to separate household things so nothing important got lost. His tone was so even that arguing felt like shouting into a soft, absorbing wall. Later that evening, I passed behind the couch and saw his laptop open on the coffee table. A spreadsheet filled the screen, showing initials and dates instead of clear labels. Before I could lean closer, he minimized it smoothly and asked if I needed something. I joked that he was planning my funeral and picking a new wife already. He just said he was tired of chaos and wanted our life more organized. The word "our" irritated me because it sounded like he meant everything except intimacy. After Leo went to bed, I poured a glass of wine and scrolled social media. Chloe had posted a story joking about men who fake sleep instead of fix problems. The timing was obvious, and I added laughing emojis pretending I did not recognize myself. Michael walked through the room, glanced at my screen, and then at the clock. Without comment, he set 2 mugs on opposite sides of the counter, one near the sink. Something in that simple gesture felt like a quiet line drawn across the room. When I finally went to the bedroom, he was not there. The guest room door was closed. I rolled my eyes and told myself he was being dramatic, punishing me like a child. I lay awake thinking about Raphael's messages and the rooftop air, not Michael's feelings. The next morning, I woke to the faint buzz of his phone alarm on the nightstand. When I reached for water, my eyes caught the alarm title before it disappeared. It read, Riverside 9:15 a.m., drop-off, with a little suitcase icon beside it. For a moment, curiosity twisted with annoyance, forming a knot I refused to untie. I told myself he was just dealing with boring financial tasks because he hated confrontation. Still, when I watched him get dressed, calmer than ever, a chill ran through me. As he left, his phone flashed a notification at the top of the screen. It showed a thread titled simply, Follow Up, disappearing as he locked it and slipped it away. I told myself he was playing some strange dramatic game and that I would win again. By the time Michael's birthday weekend arrived, I felt powerful and restless. The rooftop night had planted a mean little seed inside my thoughts. Chloe kept making jokes about men with problems they refused to admit. Jenna stayed quieter in the chat, which honestly only encouraged my worst ideas. I told myself she was embarrassed because her relationship was boring, not compassionate. That afternoon, I stood before the mirror, taking too long getting dressed. The restaurant was family-friendly, but my black dress screamed almost single energy. I decided Michael should feel grateful walking beside someone who looked like me. While I did my makeup, Leo sat on the bed with Cars. He asked why Daddy had been sleeping in the other room. I answered that Daddy needed space because he was stressed and moody lately. I added that sometimes grown men acted like children when they felt weak. Leo blinked, clearly confused, then went back to building his crooked racetrack. Hearing my own words in that quiet room felt briefly heavy. I pushed the feeling down and focused on eyeliner, contour, and distraction. In the car, Michael drove carefully, hands steady, eyes mostly on the road. He thanked me for organizing the dinner, sounding painfully formal and distant. I replied that someone had to keep life interesting, since he refused. He did not argue, only asked if I could drink less tonight. I laughed and said he should worry about his side of things. Again, he stayed quiet, which somehow bothered me more than any argument. The restaurant had a long table reserved against the wall near the bar. Relatives and friends were already gathering when we walked through the front doors. I felt eyes on my dress and posture, and I enjoyed that. Patricia hugged Michael and kissed my cheek with tight, controlled politeness. Her gaze held mine a little too long, testing my smile. Jenna waved from the middle, while Tyler gave Michael a strange, sympathetic look. Chloe arrived late, breezing in with loud complaints about traffic and tired old husbands. She leaned close and said tonight should be legendary, and I should commit. Those words hit my pride harder than any gentle warning ever could. Once everyone settled, food and drinks flowed up and down the table. I ordered another cocktail quickly, pretending I had not arrived buzzing already. Michael sipped one beer slowly and mostly focused on cutting Leo's chicken. Every time he looked up, his eyes seemed somewhere between tired and resolved. I told myself he was still sulking about nothing, refusing to loosen. Laughter rolled around the table as people traded harmless stories and memories. Eventually, Tyler mentioned old college parties and awkward drunk confessions at birthday dinners. Chloe glanced at me, smirked, and suggested confessions could happen tonight as well. People cheered lightly at the idea of speeches, and someone mentioned toasts. That was the moment I felt the stage open in front of me. My heart pounded, not from fear but from hungry, selfish excitement. I stood with my glass, making sure the dress moved correctly. The table quieted, a circle tightening, faces turning one by one. I began by saying Michael was a good man, responsible and hard-working. People smiled, nodding, expecting safe, polite sentences, ending in predictable praise. Then I shifted tone and said he was not perfect at home. I mentioned that some nights in our bedroom felt duller than traffic reports. There was a ripple of awkward laughter, part confusion, part cruel curiosity. I felt a twist of shame and stepped over it deliberately. I added that being married to certain bedroom problems had taught me patience. Chloe clapped loudly, laughing like I had delivered a brilliant comedy routine. Jenna's smile froze, and her eyes dropped instantly to Michael's bent head. Patricia folded her hands so tightly her knuckles turned pale against the cloth. Michael did not speak. He just stared at the table for several moments. I told myself silence meant weakness and that I controlled the entire room. Someone down the table shouted that I was being honest and very brave. Another relative raised a phone, clearly wanting to capture the funny birthday toast. That small rectangle pointed toward me, and I leaned into it eagerly. I said patience only went so far, and women had real needs too. Laughter came louder from some corners, mixed with whispers and sidelong worried glances. Leo, sitting beside Michael, looked up, confused by the strange adult's laughter. He tugged Michael's sleeve and quietly asked what Mommy was talking about. Michael answered in a low voice that Mommy was making unkind jokes tonight. Patricia stared at me with open disappointment, like she finally stopped pretending. Tyler watched Michael instead of me, lips tight, eyes heavy with discomfort. My cheeks burned, but I pushed forward, claiming I was simply being honest. I said speaking out forced men to improve, otherwise nothing ever changed. Inside, a smaller voice screamed that this moment would not disappear later. I drowned it with another swallow of my drink and another joke. When I finally sat, the room felt heavier and strangely more complicated. Michael thanked everyone for coming with a short, clipped speech ignoring my comments. He spoke about being grateful for family and wanting stability for Leo's future. His voice never broke, yet something in it felt quiet and final. After dessert, people drifted around collecting coats, offering careful hugs and quick goodbyes. Chloe told me I had killed it and should never apologize. Jenna murmured that maybe I pushed things a little too far tonight. I laughed off her worry, insisting Michael knew I loved him anyway. When we finally left the restaurant, the night air felt suddenly colder and sharper. On the sidewalk, Michael walked a step ahead, shoulders straight, keys already in hand. He did not reach for my waist or comment on the dress once. Instead, he unlocked the car and helped Leo in with careful, gentle motions. The ride home stayed almost silent, broken only by Leo's sleepy breathing sounds. I tried starting a playful argument about people being too sensitive about honesty. Michael answered calmly that some jokes were just cruelty wearing a pretty dress. The words hit harder than shouting, though I pretended not to notice anything. Back at the apartment, Leo went straight to bed after brushing his teeth. In the living room, Michael picked up his phone from the coffee table. A notification appeared from a contact saved only as a simple folder emoji. The preview line said a statement draft would be ready for review Monday. Before I reacted, he locked the screen and set the phone back down. He told me he was tired and would sleep in the guest room again. I accused him of sulking because I made one little public joke. He replied that I had invited strangers to laugh at his private wounds. His voice stayed level, eyes clear, which somehow made everything feel more dangerous. When he left, I noticed his calendar open briefly on the laptop nearby. A new recurring event waited there, labelled Meeting Personal Riverside, Thursdays 8 sharp. I told myself some counsellor would listen to him and blame everything on me. I decided that if people were already laughing, I might as well keep performing. What I did not see was how carefully Michael had stopped reacting already. I woke up the next morning feeling powerful outside and strangely tiny inside. I scrolled through birthday photos pretending my laughter in the video meant victory. Some relatives reacted with laughing emojis, others with quiet hearts, and several said nothing. Michael moved calmly around the apartment, packing Leo's bag and checking the clock carefully. He spoke warmly to Leo, then turned cooler and shorter whenever he addressed me. That shift felt like a door closing softly somewhere I could not quite see. During school pickup, 2 mothers watched me longer than polite, then whispered behind raised phones. I told myself they were simply jealous of my dress, hair, and bold honesty. When Michael came home later, he went straight to Leo and asked about reading. I waited for him to bring up my speech so I could crush his sensitivity. After Leo slept, we faced each other in the dark living room without television. The silence felt heavier than shouting, pressing against my ears and against my pride. Michael said calmly that he had heard everything important during that speech already yesterday. He added that some words never return to your mouth once you release them. Michael answered that not everyone laughed, and some looked deeply hurt watching me speak. Those words landed like tiny thorns, so I accused him of turning family against me. He shook his head and said people were simply deciding things for themselves now. The next afternoon, Patricia asked me to meet her with Leo at the park. Leo raced toward the playground while we sat together on a cold wooden bench. I answered with sarcasm, saying men needed reality checks or they never changed anything meaningful. Patricia said there was difference between honest conversation and deliberate public cruelty towards someone vulnerable. I pretended not to feel it and claimed children forget embarrassing moments almost instantly anyway. For the first time, I realized she might no longer stand entirely on my side. Patricia replied that he had been a steady father and reliable provider for many years. She said stability for Leo mattered more than my need for applause and attention. Her words fell like small stones, irritating yet impossible to completely shake from my thoughts. Back at the apartment, I found Michael at the table, arranging different stacks of papers. 3 binders lay open before him, labelled Home, Auto and Bank, in neat handwriting. Each binder looked thicker than necessary for simple bills, receipts, and random household documents. A wall planner beside him showed one date next month circled with bright red ink. A sticky note underneath read, "Bring forms," written in his small, careful, sharp letters. I joked he was becoming an administrator instead of behaving like my actual husband. The way he emphasized someone made my skin prickle with sudden uncomfortable recognition and fear. That evening his phone buzzed with a number while we watched television. I moved closer and pressed my ear lightly against the wood, hearing only professional tones. When he emerged, his face looked calmer, almost relieved, like after finishing a heavy chore. He said only that he had personal matters to handle and wanted some peace. Instead of fighting, he asked whether Leo's school contact information was fully updated and correct. The question felt random and unsettling, like someone quietly checking emergency exits before a fire. That night, I re-watched the birthday video alone, studying my own shining, laughing face carefully. My laughter seemed sharper now, less charming, almost like a stranger wearing my expression. I checked the reactions again and saw more quiet viewers than loud, enthusiastic responders. The following day, Jenna cancelled drinks, texting that she felt exhausted and overloaded with responsibilities. I told Chloe that Jenna was being judgmental and fragile about harmless adult humour. Chloe agreed loudly, though even she paused strangely when I described Patricia's pointed part questions. I said he always spiraled into guilt before returning to normal routines eventually afterward. As I spoke, I realized he was not spiraling now, only growing controlled and quiet. That realization slid into my chest like ice, slow, hard, and difficult to ignore. When Michael returned that evening, he checked the wall planner before saying hello to me. His eyes rested briefly on the red-circled date, then moved toward Leo's colourful drawings. He asked Leo about upcoming school events and carefully wrote times into a small notepad. He gave me a polite half-smile that never reached anywhere near his tired eyes. As he walked toward the guest room, his phone flashed another calendar alert very briefly. It read, "Meeting personal downtown, 10:30 tomorrow, with no extra details visible anywhere." He dismissed it with one tap and closed the guest room door behind him quietly. I told myself he was pretending to be strong and organized only to scare me. Still, when I stared again at that red circle on the planner, my stomach flipped. That week after the birthday dinner, the apartment felt divided and brittle. Michael moved like a tenant preparing to leave, not a rooted husband. He woke early, dressed neatly, and left without his usual sleepy kisses. I waited for shouting or tears, anything dramatic enough to prove investment. Instead, I heard only quiet cupboards and measured footsteps crossing each room. In the kitchen, 2 mugs now sat on opposite edges of the counter. His keys and wallet disappeared from our shared bowl into his bedside drawer. It felt like he was carrying pieces of our life away, silently. On the balcony one night, I tried to provoke an overdue explosion. I bragged people still messaged me about my legendary birthday roast performance. He answered that some legends were just warnings about what not to become. The words pierced because they aimed directly at my glittering, laughing, drunken face. He said he was learning how to stop accepting humiliation as normal behavior. That sentence lodged under my skin like a splinter I could not remove. Later, a cousin invited only Michael and Leo to a small weekend barbecue. The message mentioned limited seats, yet my missing name felt deliberate and heavy. I insisted it was logistics, not quiet judgment spreading through our relatives already. Michael simply noted the time, promised to drive Leo, and changed the subject. The softer his voice became, the more cornered and strangely small I felt. At a community centre gathering, loyalties finally showed in careful hugs and glances. Relatives greeted Michael warmly and offered me polite, hovering embraces that never closed. Patricia asked whether I had apologised properly yet, without alcohol, camera, or audience. She mentioned Leo's nightmares and his questions about parents stopping love after fights. Her words rang like an alarm I kept pressing snooze on repeatedly. That night, Michael placed a printed schedule on the kitchen table between us. It listed Leo's week exactly, every pickup, drop-off, and bedtime duty in columns. He said he wanted things clear in case one of us became suddenly unavailable. The phrase suddenly unavailable pushed a cold draft straight through the center of me. I snapped that he sounded like he was planning to abandon his family. He answered that planning was not running, then cleared his plate without further argument. The next morning, an unsealed envelope waited alone in our narrow hallway outbox. Beside it lay a USB stick, labeled neatly with that day's date only. When I turned it between my fingers, its lightness felt secret and important somehow. Michael appeared, took it back, and asked me not to touch his paperwork. Later, his phone alarm buzzed with a reminder titled, "Paper Drop, 8:45 Riverside." I told myself he was dealing with taxes or work forms, nothing dangerous. That evening in the parking garage, I followed him, finally demanding clear explanations. He said he had stopped mistaking cruelty for honesty and drama for love. He added he was thinking about Leo, stability, and basic respect above my pride. Then he looked straight at me and said he would handle everything properly from here. The morning I went to Michael's office building felt strangely scripted. I wore a fitted blazer and bright lipstick, practicing a sweet smile. I checked my reflection in the glass doors and adjusted my hair. At reception, I said I was here to surprise my husband. Before she answered, a man in a neat jacket approached calmly. He spoke my full name clearly and asked me to confirm it. When I nodded, he handed me a thick, official-looking envelope. I laughed and asked whether Michael was pranking me with serious paperwork. The man said these were divorce papers, formally served, effective from today. My laughter vanished so fast it felt ripped straight from my throat. I opened the envelope, eyes jumping across heavy lines and stamped headings. The top page named a petition for dissolution with temporary financial property orders. Another document outlined a custody schedule, listing Leo's weeks in careful blocks. The last page gave a court date for our first family hearing. When my vision cleared, I saw Michael near the elevators with Amir. He stood straight, work badge visible, eyes steady, watching without rushing over. I shouted that he was destroying our family over one stupid joke. My voice echoed around the glass, sounding smaller than I expected. Michael said this was about years of humiliation, not a single birthday. He added he would not teach Leo that love meant public shame. The process server asked me to sign, pen waiting above printed lines. My hand signed automatically, though my mind screamed this was impossible theatre. Michael thanked the man, then said this was him handling things properly. The elevator bell chimed as he stepped inside and faced the doors. I stood frozen in the lobby, clutching the petition and temporary orders.